Luke and I were talking about the various property professionals in the industry and all the agendas and sub-agendas that they will have. And we thought this would be a great topic for today's podcast. So, Luke, can I just start? I've got some questions here. How do the incentives of real estate agents differ from the property managers? And how can understanding these differences help investors make better decisions?
Yeah, they're very different. I like to say a real estate agent dealing with them as a buyer is like a one night stand, and a property manager is more like a long term relationship, like a life partner.
Yeah.
So the real estate agent, he's out for immediate gain. He just wants the deal to happen. That's the biggest thing for him. Real estate agents are all about volume. The best agents in an area are the ones that sell the most properties. It's not necessarily the ones that get the best prices. Real estate agents are not really judged massively. So unfortunately, there aren't a lot of people going around looking at what the price was versus what it should be. So it would be great if people did, like if a valuation model, which is like a machine learning model, came back what the valuation was and what it landed at, and looked at like how much more did the agent sell for time and time again. That would be a better way of evaluating agents, but that's not how the industry works. So if you go to one of these agent finder websites, they're going to push you to someone that they're going to get a good commission from, and there's volume. So when an agent has volume, there's always going to be examples that he can point to where he got a really good price anyway. So his game, the game of the real estate agent, is really just about being able to close deals, and that means, and the deal for them is actually presenting to the vendor and getting the vendor across. That's really what he cares about. Selling the properties is an opportunity to meet potential new customers that come through the inspections because they might be vendors themselves, but otherwise they just want that deal to happen. They don't care that much about the vendor getting the best price. So I might sound like a total cynic in this, but if you go and actually read or watch all the industry training, you'll see that it's very clear. And for me as a founder coming into this industry, it's one of the first things people think that they can tell you that you might not know. Because like because I'm a techie kind of guy, they'll tell you, the agents don't care that much about the price. So they're all about getting people to meet. Now, there's still a huge value in what sellers agents do, because vendors very often have unrealistic expectations about what the property can sell for. They have chosen certain things, they put all this money in a beautiful fireplace or something. They have a subjective view. They're biased. And so an agent is way more clear-eyed about what the value of the property genuinely is. So in all of the real estate training, what you have is get the buyer and the seller to meet in the middle. You condition them rather than try to get the absolute best price for the vendor. So a good agent will wait. They won't take the first offer that comes in. They might see the campaign through, and they'll get an okay price for you. But the reality is that they're on a commission that's fixed. So they get 2% of the overall price, even though selling for most of that commission, 95% of it, they can sell under market value and get the vast majority. It's not worth loads of extra time for them to actually get a better price.
Yeah.
It's very different from the point of view of the vendor. They want every extra dollar that they can get.
They don't care.
And there's actually studies that have found that real estate agents selling their own properties keep it on the market for longer. This is one of these Freakonomics segments of the Freakonomics book. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Thank you, mate. That's obvious there with the agents. They just want the turnover, and then they do the crunch. Bring the vendors' expectations down, bring the buyers' expectations up, and meet in the middle. And with the property managers, I find that they're really good to have on your team. If you find a good property manager, they're just gold, because they'll tell you what you need to hear. They will tell you what you really will get in rent, and obviously help you protect what is arguably your largest asset outside of your own home. So
Yeah. Another analogy might be your local butcher. You would trust more than a used car salesman. Yeah. So you only buy a used car once from that guy in your life. Whereas a local butcher, if he sells you dud meat, or even just doesn't give you a nice nice conversation when you buy, you won't go back there again. So that's what the property managers like. They're all about building relationships long term. That's the value that they're creating. Even it's not always to say they're just always nice people and agents are bad people at all. It's just the incentives that are placed on them. So when you come to sell a property management business, they look at your rent roll. So it's just how much rent are you collecting, because they just take a percentage of that rent ongoing. But it's an ongoing thing, so they have to keep everybody kind of happy.
And let's move. Thank you. Look, let's move on. What role do government policies and regulations play in shaping the incentives of professionals like developers and agents in the property industry?
Yeah, so it's a fairly unregulated industry relative to how important it is. So relative to the difference in knowledge, so asymmetric knowledge, the industry players having more knowledge than the buyers and sellers. But there are specific areas where the government has stepped in and done the good thing for the regular folk. So one example is that real estate agents might underquote massively, which means that they specify a price that's very, very low in the ad in order to drum up a lot of interest, get access to more potential vendors who show up at inspections. So just to meet more people who show up that might become their customers, but most importantly, drum up a whole lot of interest for an auction, because if you have a big crowd at an auction, you'll have a whole lot of people getting shocked at how much the price is going up and people getting emotional. Yeah. So there's rules, it varies by state, on underquoting. There's little techniques that they can exploit, like stamp duty thresholds. So they can say, look, this is within the stamp duty threshold, so this is better for you. So the good agents are typically quite aware of this. And then obviously there's things like zoning, negative gearing policy, and all of these things are really important when you. So negative gearing, obviously really important from a cash flow point of view. How much money you're going to be left with. Zoning, what can you build, and what are others going to build around you? Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. We're going into, at the time of recording, we're going into a federal election, and housing is arguably the biggest policy that they're talking about at the moment. And there's so much incentives there at both that, the person trying to buy a home, with developers are trying to give them incentives as well to build new properties and so forth. So I always think the governments are just trying to find a way to get more money into their pockets.
Yeah, absolutely.
One way or
so
another.
To your point, state governments don't have that much power in our system. So the High Court has the most power, and it gives more power to the federal government. And that means the states have to find all these unusual taxes, and a huge one is stamp duty. So if the property market collapses, so if people stop buying and selling, or if the prices aren't very high, then suddenly the states come under a lot of pressure. They can't meet their budget, so it's not in their interests for there to be a big correction. It's not in the interests of federal governments for there to be a big correction in the property market as well, because a lot of voters, particularly in marginal electorates, they tend to vote with their hip pocket. And people who have property are more likely to vote in their financial interest than those who don't. So if you imagine a young inner city progressive who's voting on identity and climate issues, versus the suburban marginal person, middle class person who's really looking at their hip pocket. There's various policies out there in the federal election, but the most of it is that they're, one way or another, they're still propping up the property market. They might make it easier for certain people to come in. So for example, the coalition is saying, yes, you can, we will make it tax deductible, some of your mortgage, but then that has the effect of actually pushing prices up.
Yeah.
So you're making it that. So if you one way or another make it easier to buy, that means that buyers, one way or another, can actually spend more money. That just the money ends up going back to the vendors, but the
Yeah.
people don't understand that. They think that it's a solution to housing affordability when it's not. I mean, the one thing that they need to do, I think, wouldn't you agree, John, is just supply.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just
just. I
supply.
don't
Not
understand why
that
they can't
complex.
focus on that. You
Yeah.
know, we introduce the first homeowners grant, and then we keep upping the first homeowners grant, and then now we can access super. You know, and then let's make our home loan tax deductible. Like it just adds more fuel to the fire. But we could be here for hours.
Yeah.
Let's move on to another
Big
question.
subject. Yeah.
What about can you explain how incentives such as bonuses or performance-based rewards impact the behaviour of, say, property managers and their approach to tenant relationships?
Yeah, so they can have it can be based on low vacancy or a high lease renewal rate, positive reviews. You probably want to speak to this more. We don't have as much to do with property managers at Microburbs, but we're more on the sales side of things. We look at yields and things, but with your experience as a when you're wearing your BA hat, one of your many hats, you probably have a lot to say about that, John.
Yeah, well, as a buyer's agent, first thing I do before I move into an area to buy is interview property managers. And I'm looking at things like how many tenants they're looking after, how many properties they're looking after, and also staff turnover. And so if they're not meeting certain KPIs, those staff may be, out they go. But yeah, we've just got to be careful with property managers and ensuring that, they're not being managed in a way that forces an issue on your property. For example, property managers might be forced to look after 200 properties when ideally they should be only looking after 100 properties.
Mm.
I'm giving you an extreme example there because after all, the more properties they have to look after, the less time and effort they can apply to you looking after your property. So that's really the only one that I can think of. But
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So, yeah, even though they are on the surface aligned to you, so they want to keep retention, their businesses, and it's a very competitive industry. So, real estate in general, unlike most industries in Australia, has lots and lots of little players. So, whether it be property managers, sellers agents, the top agencies only have like 10-15% of the market. So it's very competitive and they're always looking for efficiencies. So yeah, I can see that those kinds of incentives, if they're pushing hard, sometimes it might be something that is not obvious, but it could be that they're looking to sell the business. So older people looking to sell it and they want to hit certain metrics that the investors who would buy into the business would want.
yeah, the return on investment. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's a good one. Let's talk about you and Microburbs now.
Mm.
So how does Microburbs leverage data to uncover potential biases or misaligned incentives among property professionals that might affect market trends or investment decisions?
Yeah, yeah. So remember that agents are always trying to feed you as a buyer positive information about the property to get you over the line, get you thinking about all the good stuff, and some of it can be very subjective, and you can meet that back. You can reply to that with objective information, and sometimes it'll just be the wrong numbers. Yeah, so they're using stats but in the wrong way. So a classic example would be if it's a low end property for the suburb, they'll quote the median price, right? But with microburbs, you can actually see what the price is on a street level. So you can have streets that are much lower, and the agent will still be going by this standard from CoreLogic and all the majors, which is just the suburb median price. And so having that street level data and pocket level data is super useful. That's something that you can't get anywhere else.
Anywhere else? Yeah.
We also have weekly updates. So in fast moving markets, so if the market has actually slowed lately, so there may have been a whole lot of great sales 3 weeks ago, but that now it's coming off the boil. So having weekly updates on the median price, so you can just come back and say, look, it's really come down. And suburbs do jump around naturally. So they don't. It's not as pretty a picture, but they are naturally volatile from week to week because you just have different buyers and sellers available. You can have a whole lot of new properties come on the market, and suddenly it's a supply situation and it's a buyer's market.
And look, if someone wanted to get that report in Microburbs, what's the report called?
That's in the suburb reports.
Suburb
So
reports.
yeah, so it's suburb level data on things like weeks, but it also breaks down the suburb into the bits, into the pockets.
Right.
So
Oh, I
the
love that. Yeah. Like I can't believe the differentiation between one street to another street that look innocuous. They look very similar, but for whatever reason, the locals have this thing in their head that this side of the suburb is better than that side, and it is
absolutely, that's
quite,
massive.
yeah, it's massive, mate. So thank you. So at a suburb level, you're able to provide, at street levels. You can also provide weekly updates to prices, which is incredibly important in a hot market like, say, for example, Perth was, in the last 3 years. So that's awesome.
Yep. Another thing is we have turnover rates by street. So you as an investor, so the agent knows you're an investor. They're saying, oh, a lot of good long-term tenants on the street. You can say, look, on average, they churn every 4 years. Microburbs gives me the data. So there may be something, there are all kinds of things that maybe you don't care about as an investor that renters would care about, like noise or something,
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah.
Or some other kind of annoyance, bad neighbors on the street, trouble on the street. And that gets reflected in the turnover rates. And it's much easier just to say to an agent who's looking for people that speak industry jargon in order to respect them. If you say, look, the turnover rate on that street is actually really high, so I don't think it's worth that. I'm expecting there to be more vacancies with this property. I'm looking at this other property in this other street where the Microburbs report shows me that the turnover rate is much lower. So it's
Yeah.
it's a safer blue chip kind of
Safer
bet
investment.
for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, Luke. All right, let's move on to second last question. What are some examples of how conflicted incentives between buyers and sellers and agents can influence property transactions? And how can investors navigate these dynamics?
Yeah, so an agent can tell a seller, look, the market isn't responding, you've got to drop your price. Or an agent tells a buyer, look, we have two other offers, this won't last. And the buyer reads the room and goes, the seller's emotional, the agent is leaning on them, yeah? But there are tactics you can use. So, for example, feeding negative information to the agent. So every single thing you see bad about a property, you should tell the agent about it. Because even if the agent is saying no, I don't think that's important. We have plenty of other buyers that don't care about that thing. They will still pass that on to the vendor because their job is they're just as interested in getting the vendor down as they are you up. So feed all of that information back, and the agent loves to give market feedback to the vendor. So he's won the job because he said that he would get at this high price. Maybe his price is higher than other agents to the vendor, but then it's like, well, we've got to listen to the market. The market's saying, the pool needs work or whatever. That's just where it is. That's just the trends. I'm up with these things, and
Yeah.
the agent's very keen to pass those on. And then there's just metrics, lots of metrics. So turnover rates, price per square meter. There's all kinds of things that you can feed back to them. So there's a game of selective quoting of stats. They're going to quote certain stats, but if you quote other stats, particularly if your stats are more core to what you need as an investor, like vacancy rates on that street level, then that's he's going you can persuade the agent therefore that you're not going to go up further in price. He's going to go, okay, yes, this buyer is ready to go, but he's just looking at the numbers. This is an easy sell for me to go back to the vendor and say, look, he can't make the numbers work for anything above this price. I think there's not much more we can get out of this guy, particularly in a situation where there's only one buyer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where you have a lot more leverage. Otherwise, if you're in if buyers are competing, then it's going to end up much more as a market price.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's fair enough. Yeah. All right. Thank you, mate. And the last question I have is, in your experience, What are the most effective ways for investors to align their goals with the incentives of professionals they work with, such as agents or developers?
Yeah, a really obvious one is to have a sliding scale. So anyone can sell a property below market. Why do agents get paid for that? Yeah. So
Yeah.
anyone, you yourself, when I say you yourself, I don't mean you, John. I mean you,
You are.
the person listening to this podcast. Anyone can sell a property for 10% less than what it's worth. You don't need to pay for an agent to do that. You can just run a horrible campaign. As you just listed on REA, it'll sell. Why do agents get paid for that? Why are they getting 2% all the way up? They should only be getting commission for what extra they do. So if you have a sliding scale to the degree that you can negotiate it, then they're getting paid lots to get a high amount. That's really the extra work they do. Because a good agent, don't get me wrong, I've paid out on agents here, but a great agent is way more skilled at negotiation than the average vendor or buyer. And so they are, if a great agent is going to get a great price for you as a vendor, so by all means, go up. By all
And
means,
incentivize them.
yeah,
Yeah. Just
yeah.
incentivize them,
But do be careful though that agents are also, the average agent is very process driven anyway. So I actually sold a property and on a sliding scale, and I thought I was really clever. Didn't get that good a price, and the agent said to me afterwards, "Yeah, to be honest, we just follow our process. We don't really." They thought they were going to get enough money anyway. If you go, and yeah, I went with a more process oriented agency as well, Ray White.
Okay.
You can do, yeah, there's ones that are going to give you where they've got more leeway, and you will that will hopefully make them work harder to achieve that better price.
Yeah. So an example of that would be if you know your house is worth $1 million for simplicity's sake, you offer 1% to sell it at $1 million. But if you sell it at $1.1 million, I'll give you, an extra 0.5%.
I would go much more aggressive than that.
That's
So
what I'm. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
it's worth $1 million, pay as little as possible for that. Like, don't
0.5%.
pay, don't yeah. See how far you can push them on the sliding scale, and even if they don't actually change their process, it at least is a vote of confidence that they can genuinely sell it for the price that they claim they can. So if at all possible, get that first million as low as you can. Ideally zero. I don't know if they would agree to it, but ideally zero. And then for really high prices, it's like, hey, if you can get me to 1.2 million, that's amazing. I'll pay 10, 20%. So it's like I'm making more money. If you're making that much money for me, I'm happy to give away. That's really where the value would be for the real estate agent from your point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Well, better explained than what I did, mate. Thank you. All right. Look, thank you so much for this session. It's been a session that we could go on and on about this in terms of incentives of all the various property professionals, including ourselves. You as a provider of data and me as a mortgage broker / buyer's agent. We've all got our agendas. And hopefully that for those of you who have listened to this have picked up a few gold nuggets from this. And Luke, if anyone wants to get in contact with you or order these reports that you've been talking about, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, microburbs.com.au. Just go to the website and you can get sample reports for everything to know exactly what you would get if you paid. And it's only a couple of $100 and it should save you hundreds of thousands if you're using it right. How about you, John? How do people best get in contact with you?
Thank you, mate. And for those of you, I genuinely use Luke's data. So it's just a time saver. It allows you to buy with confidence and you will make a lot more money because you are buying in the right locations in Australia, number one. So, yeah. Thank you for asking. For those of you who want to use me as either a mortgage broker or as a buyer's agent, go to hunterwood.com.au, and just go to the Contact Us page and, just put an inquiry through there. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you in the next session. Bye for now.